Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really opening up a stack of sources, cables, transcripts, memoirs that paint this picture, um, a really agonizing picture of a major moral failure in modern diplomacy.
Mm.
We're diving deep into the 1971 crisis in what was then East Pakistan. It's the crisis that ultimately led to the birth of Bangladesh, but through a lot of bloodshed.
Yeah, and this is such a critical deep dive, I think, because it really forces you to confront what happens when, a massive humanitarian catastrophe just slams head on into high-stakes Cold War strategy.
Right.
We're looking at these ethical dilemmas where the policymakers, the architects in Washington, they consciously chose realpolitik
Yeah.
over documented human rights abuses. It's stark.
And the sources we've got access to, the private notes from the Oval Office, these blistering cables sent back from the field, they just reveal this stunning gap, right, between the facts that people knew on the ground and the fiction being maintained at the very top. So our mission today really is to cut through that noise and show you exactly how the U.S. government, specifically under Nixon and Kissinger, knowingly backed a military dictatorship that was engaging in what their own people were calling genocide.
And maybe even more importantly, we need to understand why. Why did this group of career diplomats, people steeped in the system, take this unprecedented, really radical step of formally rejecting their own government's policy?
A decision that cost them.
Oh, it cost them their careers, absolutely. But, it arguably secured their place in moral history.
So to really get this, we need to know the key players. First, the man right at the heart of it, the one seeing the unvarnished truth, Archer Blood. He was the U.S. Consul General in Dhaka. Described as sincere, bookish, very precise, a career patriot. You have just watched it all unfold.
And then opposing him, you have the architects of this policy back in Washington, President Richard Nixon and his national security advisor, Henry Kissinger.
Their tilt policy.
That's the one. Driven by, yes, massive geopolitical strategy. We'll get into the China opening. But also, the sources really reveal this intense personal dislike of India and its leaders. It's quite striking.
Yeah, that personal animosity comes through loud and clear. And finally, there's Indira Gandhi,
Right.
the formidable Prime Minister of India. She's grappling with the immediate fallout, this colossal refugee crisis flooding her country, threatening stability, and creating this immense domestic pressure pushing her towards war.
Absolutely. So it wasn't just politics. It was really this ideological, almost existential clash for everyone involved.
Okay, so let's set the stage. How did it get so bad? Where did this immediate crisis begin?
Well, the seeds were sown much earlier, obviously. Years of political, economic oppression of the Bengalis by the West Pakistani military regime. But the moment that really seemed to accelerate the final split, it was actually a natural disaster.
The 1970 Bola cyclone. The sources point to that as potentially the real reason for the final break.
Yeah, it's incredible. One of the deadliest cyclones ever recorded. And the West Pakistani government's response, it was just shockingly inadequate.
Described as feeble.
Feeble, exactly. We're talking, 90% of the population in the affected area needing relief. But the aid people saw, the visible aid on the ground, was coming more from, the Soviets, the Americans.
Not their own central government.
Not for some.
Not from Islamabad. And this just confirmed, tragically, what many Bengalis already felt, that West Pakistan simply didn't care about their lives, their region.
And while that alienation is hardening, the political situation is also reaching a breaking point. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman wins this decisive victory in the 1970 election.
Right, on a platform of autonomy for East Pakistan.
But the military dictatorship, led by Yahya Khan, they suspect he wants full secession. They refuse to honor the election results.
And this is where Archer Blood's consulate immediately flags the danger. They start sending these urgent, detailed cables back to Washington. They're warning about military action, predicting a bloodbath, almost certain. And Kissinger, initially at least, seemed to see it.
Briefly, yeah. There's a note where he agrees that using force won't work, but then very quickly he pivots. He adopts this deliberate policy that diplomats on the ground later called massive inaction.
Just letting it happen.
Letting it happen. And that inaction, that void, opened the door to absolute horror. March 25th, 1971, the Pakistani military launches Operation Searchlight.
A coordinated, devastating assault on Dhaka, designed to crush the Bengali resistance movement.
And the details, the eyewitness accounts that Blood's staff collected are just brutal.
Yeah.
This wasn't, some messy civil conflict escalating. This was targeted, overwhelming.
Truckloads of Pakistani troops rolling through Dhaka.
Sometimes slowed by makeshift barricades the Bengalis put up, but not stopped. And here's where Washington's complicity, or at least awareness, becomes immediately clear. The Pakistani army was using American weapons.
Yeah, that's crucial. Sources confirm they had U.S.-supplied M24 tanks leading the columns,
Mhm.
F-86 Sabre jets flying overhead, U.S. jeeps with .50 caliber machine guns sweeping the streets.
The White House knew. They were meticulously informed that the very equipment the U.S. provided, supposedly to contain communism, was now being used by the Pakistani army to systematically kill its own citizens.
And the targets were specific, weren't they?
Yeah.
Especially intellectuals, political figures.
Absolutely. The massacre at Dhaka University is just a horrifying example. This leafy, respected campus turned instantly into a killing field. We know professors were literally dragged from their homes and shot on the spot.
There's that awful account of the provost of the Hindu dormitory,
Yeah.
a respected English scholar.
Cotton neck, yeah. The university was meant to be the heart of Bengali intellectual life, future autonomy. Instead, it became a site of mass graves.
The scale of it.
It's staggering. An American witness saw an empty army truck arrive just to clear away what he described as a tightly packed pile of approximately 25 corpses. And that was just one small incident.
And Blood himself cabled about seeing at least 2 mass graves on campus. He mentioned the stench was terrible.
Terrible. Forced laborers later told consulate staff they counted 148 bodies in just one of those initial pits.
So, while the killing felt indiscriminate in its brutality, Blood and his team started seeing a pattern, a deeply disturbing systematic element.
Yes. This wasn't just about crushing political dissent anymore. It was sliding into something darker. Ethnic cleansing.
Which led Blood to use that incredibly charged term, selective genocide.
Exactly. His consulate's reports detailed the specific targeting of the Bengalis' Hindu minority. This wasn't collateral damage. It wasn't an accident. The campaign was, it seemed, overtly aimed at eliminating what the Pakistani military saw as the disloyal element, the core of future resistance, and, crucially, an easy proxy for India.
The story of Professor Govinda Chandra Dev really stands out there.
Doesn't it? An elderly philosophy professor, apparently known as this gentle sort of Santa Claus figure, killed simply because he was a Hindu professor, no other reason given.
Blood was very clear on this point, wasn't he?
Extremely clear. He explicitly stated the Pakistani military wasn't distinguishing between Indians and Pakistan Hindus, treating both as enemies. Now, he did note later some sporadic violence between Bengalis, but he absolutely insisted repeatedly that the Pakistani military crackdown itself fully meets criteria of term genocide.
And the focus of that genocidal action.
Centered squarely in his reporting on the Pakistani Hindu population. And it's that clarity identifying the perpetrator, the victim group, the intent that made his reporting so powerful and ultimately so dangerous to the official narrative Washington wanted to maintain.
So the pressure cooker in Dhaka must have been just immense. Let's shift focus slightly now, from the horror on the streets to Archer Blood himself. This career diplomat, how did he actually try to push back against Washington's inertia?
Well, it's really important to remember who Blood was. You described him sincere, bookish, an exact person, obsessed with facts, a patriot. When the violence kicked off, his first reactions were just driven by basic human decency.
Sheltering people.
Yeah. He and his staff provided shelter for terrified Bengalis, Muslim and Hindu alike, right there in the consulate's servant quarters. He wrote about admiring the compassion of his own staff. He wasn't going to clamp down on that basic humanitarian impulse.
But Washington wasn't having it. They expected discretion, compliance.
Totally. Ambassador Farland, the U.S. ambassador up in Islamabad, he actually admonished Blood, reminded him quite sternly that this was officially, strictly an internal affair of Pakistan's. Diplomats were supposed to keep quiet, basically.
Maintain discretion.
Right. But Blood and his team, they just couldn't square that with what they were seeing. They actually cabled back, arguing that in a situation like this, where U.S. interests included humanitarian concerns, moral principles indeed are relevant to issue.
Taking a stand.
The clear stand. But the silence from Washington was, as they put it, deafening. Their detailed factual reports were being ignored, so Blood knew he had to escalate. He had to take a bigger risk.
Which led to that first cable, the one tagged selective genocide.
He sent that, urging Washington, pleading with them to just speak out, say something. That cable landed on desks in D.C. It was passed up to Kissinger, who apparently paid no heed, just ignored it.
So that pushed Blood and his team over the edge.
It seems so. That failure to respond, that deliberate silence, pushed Blood and nearly the entire Dhaka consulate staff to take this truly radical step, a total repudiation of their own government's policy. It risked everything for them.
The Blood telegram, sent April 6th, 1971. Only about 2 weeks into the crackdown.
Yeah, and this wasn't just some internal memo, It was a formal declaration using the State Department's own dissent channel, declaring their strong dissent, signed by almost everyone working there. This kind of unified, written opposition directly challenging the Secretary of State's policy. It was absolutely unprecedented in U.S. diplomatic history.
And the language was explosive.
Oh, incredibly so. It blasted the U.S. government for its silence, condemned the complicity in crushing democracy, the democracy Sheikh Mujib had just won, and then the killer line, charging that U.S. policy demonstrated moral bankruptcy by essentially siding with the perpetrators of genocide.
Wow.
Oh.
How did that land back in Washington?
Well, it certainly jolted the staff level. Even Kissinger's own South Asia expert, Samuel Hoskinson, was reportedly shaken by the raw anger and the detail in the cable. But Kissinger himself...
Furious.
Furious is the word used. He didn't see moral courage. He saw insubordination. He dismissed the dissenters, reportedly calling them liberal bleeding hearts.
So the State Department machinery kicked in to control the damage.
Immediately.
Yeah.
They tried to muzzle Blood, restrict the cable's distribution, bury it. But the consequences for Blood personally went way beyond just being ignored or having his cable limited.
See the price.
Oh, absolutely. The price for telling that truth was immediate and crushing. Secretary of State William Rogers sent back this harsh reprimand, basically chewing Blood out for risking a leak that could embarrass the administration. And then, within days,
He was out.
unceremoniously sacked is the phrase used, ordered out of Dhaka. And the sources confirm this decision came from the highest level. Nixon and Kissinger wanted him gone.
He later called it the low point of his career, said he hit rock bottom.
Yeah, it's a powerful, really tragic lesson, isn't it? He did the heroic thing, told the truth as he saw it, documented it meticulously, and his career potential was just permanently blocked. Meanwhile, as the source notes, colleagues with, quote, more biddable consciences moved up in the world.
A chilling message from the administration. Loyalty to the game trumped loyalty to American values or even basic facts.
That seems to be the clear takeaway.
Which brings us back to the core question. Why? Why did Nixon and Kissinger commit to this policy of, well, moral bankruptcy? Why sacrifice patriotic diplomats like Blood just to back Yahya Khan's dictatorship while he's committing mass murder?
Right. I mean, the easy answer is always Cold War, but as you said, it's much more complex. It's this unique, toxic mix of big geopolitical strategy, personal obsession, and frankly, outright law-breaking.
Let's break that down. Strategy first. Pakistan was seen as vital.
Absolutely vital. A key anti-communist ally in a very strategically important region. And it created this awkward Cold War alignment, didn't it? Where the democratic U.S. found itself backing the authoritarian Yahya Khan in Pakistan.
While the authoritarian Soviet Union was backing democratic India.
Exactly. It was messy. But for Nixon particularly, that anti-communist alignment was often the supreme measure of a country's value.
But you mentioned the personal element. That seems crucial here, too.
It really does. The sources, especially the White House tapes, are just damning on this. Nixon and Kissinger shared this really starkly personal and emotional dislike of India and Indians.
We have those recordings. Nixon calling Indira Gandhi a bitch, gloating about how he really slobbered over the old witch in meetings but made sure he didn't give her an inch on policy.
It's shocking to hear, and Kissinger wasn't just a bystander in this. He actively participated. The sources say he would encourage Nixon, even awkwardly join in Nixon's profane denunciations of the Indians.
Wow.
So this raw emotional prejudice against India, against Gandhi, combined with their Cold War framework, it just completely warped their ability to react humanely or even rationally to the reports coming from Blood about East Pakistan.
And then there was the elephant in the room, the thing that trumped everything else.
The China card.
The secret opening to China. This was Nixon's great strategic obsession, his legacy project. And Yahya Khan, he was the key.
He was the essential middleman. Yahya was instrumental in setting up that secret channel to Beijing. That mission, opening relations with Mao's China, was simply paramount in the White House's calculations. It outweighed everything else. Human lives, democratic principles, the careers of their own diplomats.
Everything was secondary.
Everything. If they put serious pressure on Yahya over the atrocities in East Pakistan, they risked him pulling the plug on the China Channel. And they couldn't let that happen. That was the priority.
Which led to that almost comical deception, the diplomatic theater around Kissinger's trip.
Right. Kissinger fakes this debilitating stomachache, the famous Delhi belly, while he's visiting Pakistan. It was a total decoy. He leaves his trusted aide, Hal Saunders, behind as a decoy to attend meetings.
While Kissinger secretly slips away.
Secretly flies off to Beijing for those historic first meetings with Zhou Enlai. Apparently, Yahya Khan himself was quite enthralled by the cops and robbers atmosphere of the enterprise. He enjoyed being part of the secret.
So their commitment to Yahya, driven by the China opening, meant they had to actively support him, or at least appear to, and cover up the atrocities.
Actively support and cover up. The White House never lodged a formal protest about Pakistan using current U.S. weapons against civilians, and they kept military aid flowing, even if Nixon dismissed it as just a trickle.
That trickle was symbolic, though, wasn't it?
Hugely symbolic. It signaled continued U.S. backing. It told Yahya implicitly that the White House approved, or at least wouldn't stand in his way.
And Kissinger's justification for inaction, his use of sovereignty arguments, is just fascinatingly cynical.
It really is. When advisors suggested reasonably that maybe U.S. food aid for the starving Bengalis should be a condition, making sure it actually reached the people in the countryside who needed it,
Kissinger balked.
he recoiled at the idea,
Yeah.
defended Pakistan's absolute right to sovereignty using this just stunningly weak historical analogy. He compared it to Britain offering food aid to Abraham Lincoln during the U.S. Civil War. But on the condition that it be used to feed the people in Alabama, it completely misses the point, doesn't it? The U.S. Civil War was internal rebellion. Pakistan was committing genocide against its own citizens, and it was happening in the aftermath of a massive natural disaster where international aid was expected. The comparison just doesn't hold water.
It's a deliberate obfuscation.
Absolutely. And the administration went to extraordinary lengths to hide these choices, these calculations. White House staff were constantly sanitizing records, cleaning up memos.
And Kissinger himself took it even further.
Much further.
Yeah.
He struck that deal with the Library of Congress to keep his personal papers sealed until 5 years after his death. And even today, many crucial documents related to this period, especially the China Channel and the decisions around Pakistan, remain highly classified. They actively worked to bury this story.
And then when the actual war finally breaks out between India and Pakistan, they move beyond cover-up into, well, illegal action.
Yes. This is perhaps the most shocking part. Nixon and Kissinger actively decided to circumvent U.S. law. They arranged to transfer U.S.-made military aircraft and potentially other arms to Pakistan through third countries.
Specifically Iran and Jordan.
Iran and Jordan, yes. This was a deliberate end run around Congress and U.S. law, which prohibited direct arms transfers to Pakistan during the conflict.
And Nixon knew it was illegal.
The sources reveal Nixon being incredibly casual about it. There's a note of him acknowledging, yeah, we're trying to do something where it's a violation of law and all that. Just dismissive.
So the highest levels of the U.S. government actively breaking American law.
To support a military dictator actively committing genocide, all to protect a secret diplomatic channel to China. It's a staggering sequence of decisions.
Okay, so while Washington is tied up in these geopolitical knots and illegal maneuvers, let's look across the border. What was happening in India as a direct result of Operation Searchlight?
Well, the immediate inescapable consequence was this refugee crisis on a scale that people were calling biblical.
You mentioned reporter Sidney Schonberg. His descriptions were harrowing.
They really were. He wrote about the memory of desperate millions fleeing East Pakistan, people dying of cholera on the roadsides, their bodies attracting vultures, just unimaginable suffering.
And the numbers.
The scale is hard to comprehend. By mid-April 71, so just a few weeks in, nearly 1 million refugees had already crossed into India, into these border states, West Bengal, Assam, Tripura, which were already among India's poorest.
And eventually that number ballooned.
Ballooned is the right word. Official estimates vary, but they go as high as 10 million people. 10 million refugees flooding into regions completely unprepared to handle them. Imagine the strain. Political, social, infrastructural. Just a nightmare.
And this wasn't just a random flow of people fleeing violence. It was linked to that selective genocide Blood had identified.
Exactly. The reporting is clear. The vast majority of these refugees were Hindus. They were fleeing specific, targeted persecution by the Pakistani army, who saw them as inherently disloyal, as Indian agents, essentially. The CIA made a conservative guess early on that maybe 200,000 or more residents have been killed.
So this lands squarely in Indira Gandhi's lap. The pressure on her must have been immense.
Unrelenting. Domestically, she faced tremendous pressure, the sources say, from Parliament, from the press, the urban middle class. There was widespread public support for India to formally recognize Bangladesh.
Which everyone knew meant war with Pakistan.
Right. But beyond the public pressure, there were huge strategic concerns for Gandhi. This massive influx of refugees wasn't just a humanitarian crisis, it was a grave security risk.
Well, social tensions.
Huge social tensions, massive financial drain, but also a specific fear about extremist groups. India worried about a potential link-up between local leftist insurgents, the Naxalites, these Maoist-inspired groups active in West Bengal, and radicalized elements among the Bengali refugees coming from the east.
A destabilizing powder keg.
Potentially, yes. Gandhi feared the chaos could ignite a much wider, more dangerous insurgency within India itself.
So her argument became a direct counter to Nixon and Kissinger's focus on Pakistani sovereignty.
A really powerful counter. She essentially inverted the argument. She declared that Pakistan's actions in the East were no longer just an internal Pakistani problem. Because of the refugee crisis, because of the instability it caused, it had become an internal problem for India.
Therefore, giving India the right to intervene.
That was the implication. She argued it entitled India to demand that Pakistan stop the actions which vitally affect the peace and well-being of millions of our own citizens. It was a clear justification for potential action.
A statement that when a nation exports genocide and chaos, its neighbors have a right, maybe even an obligation, to respond.
Precisely. But even with this clear justification and the mounting pressure, India didn't just rush into war. Her senior military leaders urged caution.
General Sam Manekshaw, the army chief.
Yes, the famous story. Apparently, he faced a fuming and red-faced Indira Gandhi back in April '71. She was demanding immediate military intervention.
And Manekshaw pushed back.
Stood his ground, reportedly. Told her flatly that if the Indian army went in then, with the monsoon season about to start, it would guarantee a 100% defeat.
Because of the terrain.
Exactly. That flat, marshy delta landscape of East Bengal would become an impassable swamp during the monsoon. A logistical nightmare for an invading army, perfect for defenders. He advised waiting.
Until winter.
Until winter, November or December, when the ground would be dry, and crucially, when the Himalayan passes would be snowed in, making any potential Chinese intervention much harder. It was sound military advice.
So India played a waiting game, but not passively.
Not passively at all. While they waited for the right military timing, they engaged in this intense covert operation to support the Bengali resistance. Gandhi's government provided all possible help to the rebels, the Mukti Bahini, the freedom forces.
What did that help involve?
It was pretty extensive. Training camps set up inside India, supervised directly by the Indian Army and the Border Security Force, supplying them with weapons, including artillery, heavy mortars.
So basically running a proxy war.
A meticulously planned proxy war. The strategic goal wasn't just helping the Bengalis win independence. Indian officials candidly described the aim as ensuring East Bengal became a bottomless ditch which will suck the strength and the resources of West Pakistan, bleed them dry.
All while facing diplomatic isolation.
Pretty much total isolation. Gandhi went on a world tour, appealing for help, for international pressure on Pakistan. The response was crushingly disappointing. Only the Soviet Union offered tangible support.
The Indo-Soviet Treaty.
Right, signed in August '71. It provided military assistance and a crucial security guarantee against potential Chinese intervention. But even the Soviets initially didn't endorse a war. They urged a peaceful solution. So India felt very much alone, but strategically they were preparing meticulously.
Okay, so India is ready, waiting for the right moment. But then Pakistan makes a mistake.
A huge mistake. In a final act of, well, strategic desperation, or maybe just folly, Pakistan rashly struck the first blow. December 3rd, 1971, a surprise air attack on multiple Indian airfields across the north.
Operation Genghis Khan. Kind of like a Pearl Harbor moment?
Sort of, yeah. It was intended to cripple the Indian Air Force preemptively. It failed spectacularly, but politically. It gave Indira Gandhi exactly what she needed.
A moral high ground.
Completely. India could now enter a full-scale war framed entirely as self-defense against unprovoked Pakistani aggression.
And the reaction of the White House when this news breaks?
Immediate, explosive,
Yeah.
and completely detached from the reality that Pakistan had struck first. Nixon and Kissinger were instantly convinced India was the aggressor. They just snapped into a state of self-righteousness.
The tapes from their private conversations during those 14 days of war are something else.
They really are shocking. The personal vitriol is just raw. Nixon's back to calling Gandhi a bitch. Kissinger is agreeing, affirming they didn't give her a goddamn thing on policy during her earlier visit. They're venting this shared enmity towards the Indian people generally, complaining that decades of U.S. aid only bought hatred and suspicion.
It's pure emotion driving policy at that point.
Seems like it, and it quickly spirals into full-blown Cold War paranoia. Kissinger reaches for that really alarming historical analogy. He dramatically warns Nixon that Pakistan's potential dismemberment, its rape as he put it, is the U.S.'s Rhineland.
Comparing India's action to Hitler's remilitarization that led towards World War II.
Exactly. The fear was profound. If a Soviet-backed client state, India, could successfully break apart a U.S. ally, Pakistan, what would stop other Soviet clients from doing the same elsewhere? It felt existential to them.
So this anxiety drives them to act. Not to stop the killing, but to save Pakistan.
Precisely. To save the strategic status quo. They immediately rushed to the United Nations Security Council. But their goal isn't peace. It's demanding an immediate ceasefire and troop pullback.
Aimed specifically at denying India its victory on the battlefield before Dhaka falls.
That was the clear objective. George H.W. Bush, who was the U.S. ambassador to the UN then, was reportedly completely pro-Pakistan. Colleagues described him as almost enjoying it, having fun, pushing the U.S. line, even as Indian forces were rapidly advancing.
And then came the biggest gesture. The Seventh Fleet.
Yeah, Nixon orders Task Force 74, led by the USS Enterprise, the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, into the Bay of Bengal. A massive show of force, an 8-ship fleet steaming towards the war zone.
An atomic-powered bluff, as the sources call it.
That's exactly what it was, pure bluff. Intended to intimidate India, maybe make them pause, and also to increase pressure on the Soviets to rein in their ally.
But privately, Kissinger knew it was just posturing.
The records show he admitted it internally. Look, we don't want to get militarily involved, he said, and there isn't a chance we will. The goal was simply psychological warfare. Look tough, disrupt India's momentum, hope it forces a premature ceasefire.
But it was too little, too late.
Way too late. India's military campaign was swift and decisive, a resounding Indian victory in just under 2 weeks. Dhaka fell quickly. Indian troops closed in from all sides.
And even the remaining American diplomats in Dhaka.
The dissenters, yeah. The ones trapped there after blood was recalled. They were reportedly cheering the Indian army on, seeing the Pakistani military defeat as the only way to end the terror they'd witnessed for 9 long months.
And India played the endgame smartly, didn't they?
Brilliantly. As soon as the Pakistani forces in Dhaka formally surrendered, Indira Gandhi ordered a unilateral ceasefire on the Western Front with West Pakistan.
Why was that significant?
Because it backed up her claim all along. India has no territorial ambitions against West Pakistan. Some hawks in India wanted to push on, seize territory in the West, but Gandhi stopped it. They'd achieved their primary goal, the liberation of Bangladesh, and avoided getting bogged down in a longer war or inviting wider international condemnation.
How did Nixon take the final defeat?
Not well. He was reportedly outraged, really teed off by Pakistan's quick and humiliating defeat. He even apparently suggested the U.S. should break diplomatic relations with India entirely. The policy failure felt deeply personal to him and Kissinger.
So the war ends, Bangladesh is born. But the consequences linger, reshaping the entire region. For Pakistan, the impact was immense.
Absolutely stunning. The defeat wasn't just military, it was psychological, ideological. It exposed the army's brutality in the East to the whole world, shattering its prestige at home, and maybe most profoundly, it shattered the core idea of Pakistan itself, the two-nation theory.
Can you unpack that a bit,
Okay.
the two-nation theory?
Sure. It was the fundamental justification for creating Pakistan back in 1947 during the partition of India. The idea was simple, or simplistic. Hindus and Muslims constituted two distinct nations, inherently unable to coexist peacefully in one state. Therefore, a separate Muslim homeland, Pakistan, was necessary.
But 1971 blew that apart.
Completely. You had Muslim East Pakistan, driven by linguistic and cultural identity, Bengali identity, violently seceding from Muslim West Pakistan. It proved that religion wasn't the only or even the primary glue holding the nation together. Culture, language, shared experience, grievance. These mattered just as much, if not more. That foundational premise of Pakistan was fundamentally broken.
And that humiliation, that ideological crisis, fueled Pakistan's future path.
Deeply. The desire for revenge against India, the need to restore national pride, the profound distrust. It drove their security policy for decades, led them to seek alternative ways to challenge India, covert means, and ultimately it fueled the successful push to develop nuclear weapons, to guarantee they could never be dismembered like that again.
Meanwhile, back in the U.S. State Department, what happened to Archer Blood and the other dissenters?
They paid the price for their integrity. Archer Blood was effectively sidelined. His career trajectory was permanently stalled. When he eventually did get another posting, it was in Delhi, years later, and described as far beneath what he would have otherwise aspired to.
A clear signal to others in the Foreign Service.
An unmistakable signal. Dissent, especially dissent that embarrasses the White House, will not be tolerated. It's the classic bureaucratic story, isn't it? The person who upholds the truth, who sticks to their principles, gets punished. While, as the source says, those colleagues with more biddable consciences moved up in the world.
And perhaps the most lasting legacy, in some ways, is the success of the cover-up itself.
It's remarkable how successful Nixon and Kissinger were in ensuring essentially historical oblivion surrounded the U.S. role in the Bangladesh crisis. They poured immense energy into crafting their narrative, focusing on the China opening, the Vietnam withdrawal.
While actively sanitizing the record on Bangladesh?
Actively sanitizing the truth about U.S. knowledge of and complicity in the genocide. We even have that poignant, almost pathetic scene from 1974 as Watergate is crushing Nixon. Kissinger is there, assuring the sobbing president that history will forget Watergate and remember him only as a great peacemaker.
Yeah.
It shows how deeply they cared about controlling the historical narrative, and they were largely successful. White House papers cleaned up, Kissinger's deal with the Library of Congress, documents still classified. The dead hand of that cover-up still makes it hard, even today, for the full story of America's moral bankruptcy in 1971 to be completely known.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this. We've covered a lot of ground, a lot of grim detail. What's the core takeaway from this deep dive?
Well, I think if you boil it all down, the 1971 crisis really stands as the stark, high-stakes moment where global geopolitical strategy, specifically the absolute priority given to the secret China opening, just fundamentally eclipsed a documented human rights catastrophe.
It wasn't ignorance, it was a choice.
A deliberate choice. And that choice resulted in a profound diplomatic and moral failure by the world's leading democracy. A failure with consequences, as we've seen, that still echo across India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh today.
And the conflict really forces us, to scrutinize the motivations behind intervention, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We know the atrocities were real.
Yeah.
Archer Blood documented them meticulously.
Undeniably real.
And we know Indira Gandhi seized the strategic opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But her motives were complex too, right? Quelling domestic instability, getting rid of the refugee burden, securing India's regional dominance.
Absolutely. There's a great quote from an astute Indian official at the time grappling with this very issue. He asked essentially, yes, Mrs. Gandhi got the support of the people because of the atrocities, but was the decision to go to war taken because of the atrocities?
That's the nub of it. Was humanitarianism the driver or a useful pretext?
Exactly. India certainly had, let's say, an impure mix of motives. Strategic interests were clearly paramount. But the crucial difference is they acted for whatever mix of reasons when the global superpower, the United States, actively chose not to act on the humanitarian crisis its own diplomats were screaming about.
So the final provocative thought we want to leave you, the listener, with is this. In the often brutal, unforgiving world of international relations, where national self-interest so often drives policy, can humanitarian intervention ever be truly pure?
Or is it always inevitably tangled up with strategic advantage? Is humanitarian concern sometimes just a useful justification, a pretext for actions nations would take anyway for other reasons?
It's a tough question. One that challenges all of us to think critically about morality versus necessity in that unforgiving landscape of geopolitics. Something to chew on.